G'day poker people, welcome back. We are still barreling through the $60 an hour at 1-3 challenge. Very pleased with the results so far. So I was back in the following day on a Sunday afternoon, looking to grind out some more volume and hopefully get in another really good performance, and wouldn't complain with some good results either. So let's not waste any more time and get to gambling. Let's go. So we are in the mix for 1,000 bangers where we play this first interesting hand. So passive +1 player limps, and then I'm on the button with ace-3 offsuit. I ISO it up to $20, and then I get called by a very short stack small blind as well as the original limper. So we go three ways to a flop of 10-5-3 with two hearts. When the action checks to me, could go either way between checking and betting. I mean, betting bottom pair into two people is probably a bit too thin on average, but I will say against two passive opponents, if we're going to get any value from this hand at all, this is probably the best street to do it on, so I don't mind betting it against two passive opponents. I decide to go for it in this spot, another hair width thin value bet. I go ahead and make it 25. And I get called by both opponents, which is not ideal, but we get bailed out on the turn because it is the 3 of diamonds. Let's go. We have the nut trips, and then things get juicy out when the short stack small blind leads out for 50, and then the +1 player calls. The action's back on me here, and the small blind has $55 left behind after the $50, so I really don't think they're going to fold anything in their range. I actually think their leading range is pretty strong too. It's probably a lot of 10x, probably a lot of nutted draws, some threes, although we do block them pretty hard. So I definitely want to go ahead and raise here. I mean, think about it. If I had a potential bluff in this spot, would I ever doing it, expecting to have no fold equity against the small blind? Of course not. So when I have a thick value hand like the nut trips here, I definitely should raise. The only interesting decision is sizing, and I sort of want to go the maximum bet that I think the +1 player will overcall with their flush draws. I decide to make it 220. Maybe could go a little bit smaller, like 175, but no, we're just splitting hairs on that difference. Whatever the case, though, I make it 225. And then to my shock and horror, the small blind actually folds. I actually sat there aghast because I have no idea what I guess they let out into two people for half their stack with an airball bluff. Like, it must be, right? So yeah, it was really shocked to see that. And the +1 player folds as well, which I was less shocked about. But we do end up taking down this pot, but I'm left aghast. What the hell did the small blind have here? So we don't have much time to dwell on our bewilderment because we've got another hand to play. There's two limps before I'm in the hijack with pocket eights. I ISO it up to 25, and then I get three different calls. So a total of four ways to a flop of Queen 7-6 rainbow. When the action checks to me, I think there's a decent chance we're good with the pocket eights here, but I think it would be a bit too thin betting into three different people. Similar situation to the previous hand, but I think betting in position to two people with bottom pair is a little less thin than pocket eights betting here would be. It's a subtle difference, but I think this is a more clear check spot the more multi-way we are. So I check it, and then the action checks through, and we get a free turn, which is the 10 of diamonds. Not the best turn card in the world. I think the opponents are going to have plenty of 10x combinations in their range. So I just check it again, and then we get a free river as well. I know what you're thinking, Lee, this is such an exciting hand. Oh my God, is it going to check all the way through? Well, the river's a two of clubs, and when the action checks to me with only one player left to act behind, I think this is a spot where we can bet for thin value. I mean, sure, the opponents are still going to have a lot of 10x. I mean, they're passive opponents, so I don't think they're always just going to go ahead and bet a 10 on the river. But I think there are, if they do have any pair worse than mine, I think they will call a bet here. Can't go super large or anything just because the opponents do have some 10s in their range, but I decided on a bet of 40, a bit less than half pot, and I think this is a good sizing. I think even like pocket threes and ace deuce will call this bet. So I go ahead and make it 40, and then the cutoff and the small blind fold before the action's left on the low jack limper, who looks at me and he says, "You missed with ace king or ace jack, didn't you?" as he throws in the call. And I don't say anything, but in my head I'm like, no ace king or ace jack here, buddy. I show my pocket eights, and then he ends up mucking his hand. So you love to see it getting thin value in these 1-3 streets. Let's get it. G'day poker people, I'm here today to tell you about my new favourite app that is helping me improve my game day by day, and it is the Fastroll Poker app. Essentially what it is, it's a hand history tracker for live poker players, something akin to Poker Tracker for online poker, but they're bridging the gap and they're making it for live poker players and following a very user-friendly, intuitive software. You can input the hand histories literally right after you're done playing them in a matter of seconds. It takes me about 15 to 30 seconds after I've played each hand, and there's stored on a database inside the app. And the beautiful thing about that is after the session's over, I can go back and look over the hands I've played and see what I'm doing well, and more commonly where I've punted off a lot of money, and thus helping me know what the leaks in my games are and then how I can plug them. So I cannot recommend this app strongly enough if you are a serious poker player who wants to use this tool to help improve your game. I've been offered many sponsorship deals in the past from things I think were a bit shady. This is the first thing I actually wanted to promote because I think it is actually a very good tool which will help you guys actually improve your poker game. So if you want to try it out, use the code LEEBETS when you purchase an annual subscription and you'll get the first month free. If you don't like it after the first month, you're totally fine to cancel without charge, but I really think you guys are going to love this app and can't recommend it strongly enough. It's a massive tool to help your game. So use the code LEEBETS on an annual subscription and you'll get the first month free. For now though, let's fast roll back into the gambling. Getting back into the action with this absolute doozy of a hand. So there's two open limps before a loose aggressive cutoff raises it up to 20. Then I'm on the button with A7 of spades, and I'm going to be playing 3-bet or fold in this spot when the opponent goes almost to 7x open. I think you're either going to make more EV by folding because their range is too tight, or by bluff raising because their range is too loose. I think cold calling here would be very, very poor decision making, and because the opponent is loose aggressive, I'm going to lean slightly towards the aggressive 3-bet frequency. So I go ahead and make it 70 here, and then I get called by the under the gun limper and the cutoff raiser as well. So we do only get one fold here, not quite ideal. We are 3 ways to a flop. At least we're in position though, and the flop is King Jack 7 with 2 diamonds. When the action checks to me, I think we have a pretty clear cut check here. Unlike in the previous hand where I raised over a limper and then it was 3-way and I had bottom pair in position, this time it's a 3-bet pot. Their ranges are going to be stronger. I think they have a bunch of King X combinations, probably all of the sets except for pocket kings on this board, although the under the gun limp caller might have pocket kings and they're trying to trap. So yeah, I just think their ranges are too strong, and taking a free turn will be very good in my opinion. So I check it and we get that free turn, which is the 2 of hearts, about the brickiest brick possible. The under the gun player checks to the cutoff. He goes ahead and bets 95. Now, calling here is very, very thin, although I will say, being that the cutoff is loose aggressive and there are a million draws on this board, diamonds, queen 10, ace queen, 10-9 is double gutted, I think there's a very decent chance they're probably going to just stab at the pot with all of those, as well as some even more unnatural bluffs. So I think very often we are going to be ahead of their range. It is pretty thin though, because we are going to have to fade a million different things on the river, as well as the under the gun player potentially still trapping with aces or kings. I decide to throw in the call here. Really dicey spot in my opinion. Maybe folding is slightly more winning. Let me know what you would do in the comments below. Whatever the case, I do call, and then the under the gun player check raises to 295. So there you go. Really do think they were trapping, in all honesty. And when the cutoff calls, I think we have a pretty easy fold here. I'm very concerned that the under the gun player does have a set or pocket aces that they were trying to trap with. So almost for sure I'm behind them. We still could be ahead of some of the cutoff draws, but I mean, when we have to fade a million things on the river, I just think calling here would be a massive pump. So I make what I think is a pretty easy fold. And then the other two, a heads up to a river, which is the 8 of hearts. Then the under the gun player checks it over the cutoff. Who checks back? So fortunately, we are going to get to see both their hands. The under the gun player had ace queen of diamonds, so they actually had a monster draw on the flop and they decided to check raise on the turn. So I guess my read on them being super nutted on the turn was kind of wrong, although they do have a very strong draw. Somehow we had them beat with our pair of 7s though. And then the cutoff says damn it, and he shows queen 10 of spades. So somehow, if we were a massive station and called here, we would have won this hand. I'm just as shocked as I'm sure all of you guys are, but yeah, wow, these players getting crazy out of line, and they ended up getting me off of my bottom pair winner. Good for them, I suppose. I'm definitely still happy with this fold in the long run, but yeah, just goes to show, sometimes people wow the fuck out. Next hand up, They're back, baby. Double board bomb pots. You love to see it. Love these bloody things. And it gets even better because we're in what would have been the big blind with Pocket Kings. Premium in a double board bomb pot. Very decent chance we're going to have an overpair on at least one board. And we do, because both the flops go up there. And you can see it is Queen 7 deuce on both boards. So wow, super connected boards in a bomb pot. Very rare you see that. And we do have an overpair on both boards. Having said that though, when the small blind checks it over to me out of position to 6 different people, I'm probably going to be checking my entire range and seeing what develops, although we're liking this situation. We have a pretty strong hand here. So I check it, and then what would have been the under the gun next to at goes ahead and bets 60, and it folds all the way back to me. Now I'm kind of tempted to check raise here to try and build the pot against a Queen X, but I think it's a bit dicey. My opponent is going to have all the combinations of 2 pairs on these boards, being there's a bomb pot and there is no filtering pre-flop. So I played a bit more cautious and just call. So we do get to see 2 free turns. The first one's the 10 of clubs. Second one is the Jack of hearts. So we still got the overpair on both boards. Checking it over to the villain, trying to fade them, betting their 2 pair. And then they do check it back. So now we're feeling very confident that they do have a single pair on each board. And the first river is the 6 of spades and the second one is the 10 of spades. So now we just want to go ahead and bet the maximum. I think a queen will call. I decide on 150 and then the opponent calls pretty quickly. I end up showing my hand and then they show 7-6 of hearts. So we do end up chopping with them. They have 2 pair on one board and 1 pair on the other. And we have an overpair on both boards. So we end up chopping here. I'll take it. Things could be much worse in a bomb pot. This next hand starts out probably even better than the previous one because not only do we have a button straddle on, but I'm in the small blind with pocket aces, baby. Let's go for my second and my first favorite hand into interesting hands. You'll love to see it. Of course, going to start things off with a raise here. I go ahead and make it 30 and then I get called by 2 passive opponents. So we have 3 ways to a flop, which is ace 8-3 with 2 spades. Let's go top set with my favorite hand. These are happy days. Now, I think usually when I'm out of position to 2 people, I love checking pretty much most of my hands, trying to induce action, see what the other players do. But I think this might be a spot where I can make an exception and just bet with this hand, being that both of the opponents are passive. I really don't expect them to stab at the pot too often with bluffs or with weaker pairs. So I should just bet and get calls from their really loose ranges. I don't think I was 100% dialed in and probably just autopiloting a bit here because I do check it over to the villains. I think this is a mistake though against 2 passive players. Whatever the case though, I check it over to them and they both check back, which shouldn't be too surprising. So we do get a free turn, which is the Queen of Diamonds. This is putting out a bunch of different gut shot draws now. And so I think there's just more hands we can get called by with a lead here. So I go ahead and bet 50. Do want to size up a bit just because we are so close to the river and I'm not going to have many more chances to build up a pot. Should have been doing this on the flop though. Whatever the case, I made it 50 and then what do you know? Both opponents call and I am definitely kicking myself for not betting on the flop. And we do get to see a river, which is the 10 of diamonds. Now, I do really like this river card because I think both of the opponents are probably going to have Queen 10 offsuit pure, the way the hand's played out. And if they do want to bluff with like a misdraw or something, I think this might be a good spot to go over and induce a bet with a check out of position to 2 people. I mean, it's hard to imagine they both whiffed on this river. So I check it over to the passive low jack who goes ahead and bets 125 and then the button calls 125. Now we have the really interesting decision here. Is this too thin to check raise? I think the low jack probably has king jack offsuit pure in their range, so there are 16 combinations of hands we lose to. I don't think the button does. I think he would have raised on the river if he did have king jack, so not as worried about him, but there are also all the combinations of queen 10 I can get called by any ace-x that might have checked on the flop. It's a bit hard since we block it so heavily. I do decide to mix in a bit of a check raise here, maybe a bit too thin though with so many king jack offsuit combinations in the low jack's range. I go ahead and raise it to 420, which honestly, I mean, this is the meme number to go ahead and raise to, of course, but I think it's not the best sizing in the world. Should go a little bit smaller here, just because we do have to worry about being cooled by king jack. But whatever the case, I meme it up and blaze it to 420, and then the action's back on the low jack, who doesn't think too long before ripping it all in for 820. Button looks disgusted and he ends up folding, and you can see there, I show my pocket aces to the camera, there is absolutely zero chance I'm going to call this bet. I think the low jack has king jack 100% of the time, and I'm just kicking myself for checking on the flop, for checking on the river, for check raising on the river. Actually, I think that's even worse. So yeah, just really kicking myself for the way I've played this hand. But I try to get a little bit of redemption by making the hero fold on the river with top set. I end up folding my hand, and then the button shows that he folded ace jack. So yeah, there you go. Checks it on the flop. Didn't even get a bet out of top pair and strong kicker. So that's definitely a mistake. And then the low jack was actually kind enough to show us he did have king jack of hearts. So there you go. We're getting away from it with the hero fold. But even with that in mind, and I am happy with my river fold, I just am unhappy with pretty much every other decision I made in this hand, except for raising pre-flop. So yeah, just not super happy with how I played this hand, in all honesty. So despite getting away from it at the end, disappointed with the last hand. Hopefully we can bounce back and play this next hand better. There's an under the gun limp, and then I'm in the cutoff with 8-7 of diamonds. I ISO it up to 20, and then the isolation doesn't work because I get called by literally everyone left in the hand. So we were going a total of 5 ways to a flop of 6-5-4 rainbow. What? I take it back. I'm glad everyone's in now because we flopped the stone cold nutter butters. When the action checks to me, definitely want to go ahead and bet here. Super wet board that my opponent's going to have a lot of overpairs to, a lot of 2 pairs and sets as well, even worse straights as possible. So definitely want to go ahead and bet, and want to use a chunkier size here to get value from so many things. I go ahead and make it 50, and I get called by a passive button as well as a tight aggressive small blind. So we are 3 ways to a turn, which is the ace of diamonds putting out backdoor diamonds, giving us a flush draw to go along with our straight. When the small blind checks it over to me, want to continue with a large bet size here. I actually think the opponents are going to have way more 2 pairs now on this turn card, since particularly the button, who is a passive player, love playing stuff like ace-6, ace-5 and ace-4 offsuit pre-flop. So I just want to go big here to try and get value from those hands. I decide on 150. I mean, not that you want to overbet in a multi-way pot or anything, but I still think this is probably a little too small. Maybe betting like 200 will be a bit better, since I think my opponents have so many worse calls on this board. Whatever the case though, slight mistake if it is one at all. I go ahead and make it 150, and then the button does call and the small blind folds. So we're heads up to a river, which is the ace of spades, and I'm actually not really in love with this river. I think the opponent is going to have a fair few full houses in their range, being that they're a passive opponent and they were playing the entire pot in position. I don't think they're just blindly going to raise off with their 2 pairs and sets on the turn. So it's a little bit of concern. We definitely do not have the nuts anymore, but I think we're still strong enough to bet for value here. If the opponent floated on the flop with ace king or ace queen, it would not be the craziest thing I've ever seen in a 1-3 game. And I just want to bet a size here that does maximize value against ace x, but doesn't just totally screw us where we're only getting action from full houses. I decide on betting 300, which probably a good sizing in my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Whatever the case, I make it 300, and the button thinks for a few seconds before folding. So definitely more happy with how we played this hand. I'm wondering if the ace on the river did cost us a bit of an action though. This next hand is an absolute banger, and it starts off on a positive note because we've got a cutoff straddle, and then I'm next to act on the button with ace jack offsuit. I raise it up to 30 using my larger open size here because this is a very call happy table, so just want to build a pot when I do have a strong hand. So I make it 30 here, and then we get called by one of the call happy opponents in the big blind before the action gets back to the cutoff straddler, who is loose aggressive and playing off a $300 stack, and they actually go ahead and 3-bet it to 100. Being that the opponent started with 300 and they're loose aggressive, I'm actually very happy to get all in here with ace jack. I think it's going to be ahead of their range. So I decide to 4-bet it up to 300, trying to isolate, get the all in flip against them. I make it 300, and then the call happy big blind actually calls the 300 before the cutoff calls all in. So we are still playing a $0 side pot against the big blind, and we've got the locked $900 pot. So pretty interesting dynamics as we go heads up with the big blind to a flop of ace king 6 with 2 spades and the ace of hearts. So very happy we hit here. When the opponent checks it over to me, definitely want to go ahead and bet here and try and get value from the big blind's range, but I don't think they're going to have too many strong hands on this board that can call a smaller bet. So definitely want to bet small. I mean, in theory, you want to bet small when there is a $0 side pot because it's just pretty hard to bluff in these spots when you've got no fold equity against one of your players' range. So I decide to mix in a bet here. I make it 75, literally less than 1/10 the size of the all-in pot. Really just trying to keep my opponent's pocket pairs in there. Gut shots as well, just really trying to get thin value with a small bet here. So I make it 75 and then the big blind calls. So we're building up the side pot a little bit now and we see a turn which is the 3 of spades. Then the big blind thinks a little bit before leading out 300. I have 625 left in my stack, so I'm either going all in or folding in this spot. Calling would be completely pointless, naturally. And I really am skeptical that the big blind has a flush here. I mean, they called a tiny bet on the flop and then they leaded when the flush got there on the turn. I mean, I guess it's possible, but it just seems like they are turning one of those pocket pairs into a bluff. Some of those pocket pairs are going to have a spade, so it's not like we're totally out of the woods against that part of their range, but I think they're going to have that stuff a lot more often than they're genuinely going to have a flush when they lead here. So with that in mind, I rip it all in for the 625 and then the big blind is in the tank. Very, very happy to not get snap called here. Now I think it's almost for certain they have a worse pocket pair and probably without a spade if they are tanking that long. And then after maybe 45 seconds to a minute, they do end up throwing in the call. So we have a $1,500 side pot to go along with the almost $900 main pot. We are playing a big pot here. I show my hand and then the big blind shows pocket sevens with a spade. So we do have plenty to fade on the river. And then the cutoff shows 6-5 of clubs. So they've actually got some 2 pair and trip outs as well. So really going to need to fade it on the river. And then the river is the 9 of diamonds, let's go. We end up scooping both pots with our top pair. You love to see it. This is definitely going to help the $60 an hour at 1-3 challenge. Let's go. Next hand up, we've got the button straddle line. You love to see it. And I'm first to act after the straddle yet again. That's 3 hands in a row. And it's the 3rd hand where I've woken up with a premium. Because I have pocket queens this time. You love to see it. I go ahead and make it 30, which I will say probably should be raising a bit bigger, out of position to so many people in a call happy table. Whatever the case though, I make it 30 here. And then a tight aggressive under the gun player actually goes ahead and 3 bets it to 110. When the action folds back to me, they've got 500 in their stack. So I think the standard play here is just to go all in for the 500. I mean, this hand is going to benefit a lot more from fold equity than a hand like pocket aces would. So if I'm going to have an all-in rip range here, I think pocket queens fits pretty solidly in it. The one thing I will say, this is a tighter opponent, so there is more cause for concern. I mean, are they always 3-betting ace queen and pocket jacks? I honestly don't know 100%. I mean, probably. And if there's the case that they do it sometimes, of course I have to go all in and just stack off here. But if they are the type that just flats with ace queen and pocket jacks in this spot, then it is getting a bit dicey taking a flip with this hand. Whatever the case though, I don't have that read that dialed in, so I do just stick to the standard play, rip it all in for the 500. The under the gun player calls pretty quickly. I show my pocket queens and then the villain shows ace king of diamonds. We've got a classic race here and we've got the live run out on the vlog and the flop is 10-6-7 with all clubs. Very happy to see it. The opponent does not have a single club, so we're in really, really good shape going to the turn, which is the 2 of clubs. So there are some chop outs for my villain now, but our equity against their hand is absolutely fantastic. Really hoping to fade an ace and a king or a club, and we're going to scoop this whole thing. And then the river is the ace of hearts. Ooh, that took the wind out of my sails. The opponent ends up getting us on this one, which, I mean, I shouldn't complain. We have ran good this session, but I think this is the point where the luck was about to change. I actually decided to leave after this one. I mean, I hate to be that guy who takes his ball and runs home as soon as he loses a big pot, but just judging by the way the past few sessions have gone, as the longer I play, the more poor my decision making gets, and I just wanted to leave before I let losing a flip affect my decisions in a negative way. So we wrapped it up after this hand. There you have it. Those were the most interesting hands we played across this 7-hour and 40-minute session. And even though I did leave quote unquote early, I actually really think that I got plenty of volume in. I mean, this is not a short session by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm really, really happy I left when I did, because I was playing well. And as soon as something didn't go my way and I felt myself tilting, even just like 20%, I decided to leave. And I think that's kind of perfect, just to dip right before you feel yourself tilting off. So very happy with my quitting decision, very happy with the vast majority of decisions I made in this session. Think I chose some good spots to go for thin value in a called happy table and made the most of it. The only real egregious error is that pocket aces hand. Honestly, I'd really dislike the vast majority of decisions I made during that hand, particularly at the call happy table. So yeah, just at least I got away from it on the river, but even so, I did not lead to lose that much. Or that's really the only thing holding me back. I'm going to give myself an A grade overall, because I am very, very happy with the majority of decisions. And I mean, the one mistake isn't great, but I mean, we all make mistakes and I can forgive myself for that one. So A grade for today's session, and we had good results, won 463 across the 7 hours and 40 minutes. So that is very good. And of course, that is naturally going to add towards our win rate. We did have a slight decrease in our win rate from the previous session, but as you can see, we are well above $60 an hour at 1-3. Happy with how this challenge is going so far. Make sure you hit subscribe and you catch the next video, because that will be a bit of a turning point in the challenge. You'll see what I mean in my next vlog. For now though, I'm out of here. Hadebra.